The day the Council witnessed humanity's polite mode turn off in real time. Let me tell you something about humans that nobody warned us about in the Galactic Council orientation materials. And believe me, I checked. Twice. 3 times actually. Because what I witnessed that day seemed physically impossible according to every psychological profile we had on record. My name is Vector, and I'm a diplomatic observer for the Antarian Commonwealth. 17 cycles I've spent documenting first contact protocols, trade negotiations, and the occasional territorial dispute. I've seen Krolak's war chiefs negotiate peace treaties. I've watched Selenite queens dissolve their own monarchies for the greater good of their people. I thought I'd seen every possible variation of sentient behavior. Then humanity showed up to the council chambers on Station Epsilon and I realized I knew absolutely nothing. The humans had been part of the Galactic Council for exactly 4 standard years, 4 years of them saying please and thank you, and we completely understand your concerns while the rest of the galaxy walked all over them like a cheap floor mat. 4 years of watching them smile through clenched teeth while the Draknari Empire seized 3 of their outer colonies under some ridiculous legal loophole. 4 years of them nodding politely while the Mercantile Guild taxed their trade routes into oblivion. We all thought they were weak, spineless. A species so desperate for acceptance that they'd tolerate anything. Oh, how wrong we were. How magnificently, terrifyingly wrong. The emergency session had been called by High Chancellor Tormund, a Draknari with scales like polished obsidian and an ego roughly the size of a small moon. He stood at the central podium, his voice booming through the translation matrix with all the subtlety of a meteor strike. Once again, the human delegation requests time to address the council regarding their so-called grievances, Tormund announced, somehow making the word grievances sound like an insult to his ancestry, as if we don't have more important matters to discuss. I watched the human delegation from my observation platform. There were 5 of them today. Ambassador Marcus Flynn stood at the center, a middle-aged human with gray streaking through his dark hair and eyes that looked tired, exhausted really. Beside him stood Commander Lisa Park, their military attaché, a woman whose service record I'd studied extensively. Decorated, brilliant, terrifying in simulations. Next to her was Dr. James Cooper, their xenobiological specialist, economic advisor Patricia Valdez, and finally, junior diplomat Kevin Martinez, fresh-faced and barely into his 2nd cycle of service. Ambassador Flynn approached the speaking platform with that same measured, careful walk. He activated his translator and began in that calm, reasonable tone they always used. Honorable Council members, we come before you today to discuss the recent seizure of the human colony on Praxis 7 by Draknari forces. According to Section 12 of the Colonization Accords, Section 12 was amended. Tormund interrupted, not even bothering to look at Flynn. 6 months ago. Perhaps if the human delegation paid attention to council proceedings instead of whining about every minor territorial adjustment, they would know this. A ripple of laughter echoed through the chamber. The Mercantile Guild representatives chittered among themselves. Even some of the typically neutral observers seemed amused. I wasn't laughing. I was watching Commander Park's hands. They had curled into fists at her sides, knuckles white with pressure. That was new. Flynn's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. The amendment you reference requires a minimum 30-day notice period for territorial claims. The Draknari fleet arrived at Praxis 7 with no warning whatsoever. 17,000 human civilians were given 4 hours to evacuate. 4 hours, Chancellor. Many couldn't gather their children from school facilities in time. Then perhaps humans should be faster learners, Tormund replied. And that shark-like smile spread across his features. Or is that asking too much from a species that only discovered faster-than-light travel 6 of your years ago? More laughter. Louder this time. I saw something flicker across Flynn's face, something dark, something that made my antenna twitch with sudden unease. Chancellor Tormund, Flynn said, and his voice had dropped half an octave, still polite, still controlled. But there was something underneath now, something that hummed like a reactor core building toward critical mass. We are asking respectfully for the Council to enforce its own laws, to honor the principles upon which this body was founded. Are you? Tormund leaned forward, clearly enjoying himself. Because from where I stand, Ambassador, it sounds like you're demanding special treatment. Perhaps humanity isn't quite ready for the responsibilities of Council membership. Perhaps you need a few more centuries to mature as a species before you can participate meaningfully in galactic affairs. That's when I saw it. The moment everything changed. Ambassador Flynn didn't move, didn't speak, but something happened to his face. The diplomatic smile, the one he'd worn like armor for 4 solid years, just vanished. Disappeared like someone had flipped a switch somewhere deep in his brain. He stood there in absolute silence for 3 full seconds. 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. Then he laughed. Not a polite chuckle. A real laugh, deep and genuine and completely inappropriate for the setting. It was the kind of laugh that made every creature in that chamber stop what they were doing and turn to stare. "You know what?" Flynn said. And his voice had changed completely. The careful diplomatic tone was gone, replaced by something casual, almost conversational. "Yeah, you're absolutely right, Chancellor. You got us. We've been way too polite about this whole thing." He turned to his delegation. "Commander Park, how long have you been telling me to let you handle this differently?" Park's eyes widened. "Sir, I don't think." 4 years, right?" Flynn continued. 4 years of you and about 6,000 other people telling me that diplomacy would work if we just gave it time, that we needed to play by the rules, that we couldn't just do things the human way because we're the new kids and we have to prove we're civilized. Dr. Cooper stepped forward. "Marcus, maybe we should—" "Sit down, James." Flynn didn't even look at him. He was still staring at Tormund with that unsettling smile. "Actually, everyone sit down. I'm going to try something different today." I pulled up my recording equipment and made sure everything was capturing this. Whatever was happening, it needed to be documented. Flynn turned back to the council, and I swear on my homeworld, the temperature in the room dropped by several degrees. "So here's the thing, Chancellor Tormund. And honestly, this goes for most of you sitting in this chamber right now. You think we're weak. You think we're pushovers. You think that because we've been polite for 4 years that's all we are. That we're some kind of fluffy, harmless species that you can kick around whenever it's convenient." He started walking. Not pacing. Walking. Like a predator circling prey. "Let me tell you about Earth. About humanity. About what we were doing while the rest of you were building your fancy space empires and writing your pretty laws. We were killing each other. Constantly. Creatively. For literally any reason you can imagine. Resources. Territory. Gods. The color of someone's skin. A wrong look. An insult to someone's mother. The chamber had gone completely silent. We fought with sticks and stones. Then bronze and iron. Then gunpowder and explosives. Then atomic weapons that could turn entire cities into glass. We got so good at violence that we had to invent the concept of war crimes just to put some boundaries on how we murdered each other. And you want to know the truly hilarious part? Flynn stopped walking. He was directly in front of Tormund now, looking up at the much larger alien. "We got so efficient at killing our own species that we started to scare ourselves, so we made rules, treaties, organizations dedicated to preventing war. And it worked. Sort of. We stopped having world-ending conflicts every few decades. We learned to talk instead of shoot. We discovered that cooperation was more profitable than destruction." He leaned against the podium, completely casual, like he was chatting with friends at a social gathering. "So when we got out here and found the Galactic Council with all its laws and procedures and diplomatic protocols, we thought, perfect. This is familiar. We can work with this. And we've been trying, really genuinely trying, because we wanted to prove that humanity had evolved past its violent nature, that we could be the good guys for once." The smile disappeared. "But here's what you need to understand, Chancellor. What all of you need to understand. We didn't stop being violent because we forgot how. We stopped because we chose to. Every single day, every single human makes a choice to follow the rules, to be civilized, to solve problems with words instead of weapons. It's a choice, and choices can be unmade." Patricia Valdez had gone pale. "Ambassador Flynn, I must advise." "Oh, don't worry, Patricia. I'm not declaring war. That would be crude." Flynn's voice was cheerful again. Disturbingly so. "I'm just providing some context. Educational material, really. For our esteemed council members who seem confused about who they're dealing with." He pulled out a data tablet and activated the holographic display. "Let me show you something fun. This is Earth, year 1945, approximately 81 years before we made first contact. We'd just finished fighting a global war. Somewhere between 70 and 85 million dead. About 3% of our entire population at the time. We developed nuclear weapons specifically to end that conflict. Used them twice. Killed about 250,000 people in seconds. The hologram showed mushroom clouds rising over cities. Terrible, right? A species-wide trauma that should have taught us never to create such weapons again. Flynn swiped to the next image. Instead, we made more, bigger ones. By the year 2025, we had enough nuclear weapons to destroy our entire planet's surface several times over, just sitting there, ready to go, and we never used them again. You know why? Nobody answered. The entire council was transfixed. Because we were scared of ourselves. Because we looked at what we were capable of and decided collectively that there had to be a better way. So we built institutions, rules, consequences. We created the United Nations, the World Court, the International Criminal Court. We made it harder to start wars and easier to end them. We turned that violent impulse inward, channeled it into competition instead of conflict. Sports, business, politics. All the same aggressive instincts, just redirected into mostly non-lethal forms. He closed the hologram. So when I came to this council 4 years ago, I came with the full weight of human history on my shoulders. Billions of people back home watching to see if we could make this work. If we could prove that humanity deserved a place among the civilized species of the galaxy. And I've been trying, Chancellor. I've been so very, very polite. The room was so quiet I could hear the environmental systems humming. But you know what I realized today? While you were laughing about human children not being able to evacuate in time, I realized that you don't actually care about polite, you don't care about following your own rules. You care about power. About who's strong enough to take what they want and who's weak enough to get walked over. Flynn straightened up. His entire posture changed. Where before he'd seemed tired, defeated, now he looked dangerous. So let me tell you what's going to happen next, Chancellor Tormund. And this isn't a threat. This isn't diplomacy. This is just information. Facts. Data. The kind of thing you can verify independently if you want. He started counting on his fingers. 1. You're going to return Praxis 7 to human control within 48 standard hours. 2. You're going to provide full compensation for damages and relocation costs. 3. You're going to issue a formal apology to every human family affected by this illegal seizure. 4. You're going to amend that convenient little rule change you made 6 months ago, to include the original 30-day notification period. And 5. Flynn smiled. It was not a nice smile. You're going to do all of this without complaint, without negotiation, and without any further attempts to seize human territory. Because if you don't, I'm going to stop being polite. And trust me, Chancellor, you really don't want to find out what humanity looks like when we stop pretending to be civilized. Tormund's scales rippled with what I recognized as Draknari amusement. The fool actually thought Flynn was bluffing. He rose to his full height, nearly 3 meters of armored reptilian superiority, and looked down at the human ambassador with undisguised contempt. Are you threatening the Draknari Empire, Ambassador? Because I should remind you that we have 600 warships patrolling this sector alone. Your entire fleet numbers what? 200 vessels. And most of those are converted cargo haulers with weapons bolted onto the hull. He gestured broadly to the council. This body does not respond to threats from species barely out of their planetary cradle. Flynn nodded slowly. Like a teacher watching a student give an incorrect answer but wanting them to finish their thought before correcting them. You're absolutely right about the ship count, Chancellor. Our fleet is small, outdated by your standards. We've been spending most of our resources on trade infrastructure and colony development instead of military expansion, because we were trying to be good neighbors, responsible council members. He paused. But you know what's funny about human military history? We've never really needed superior numbers to win wars, we just need to be more creative than the other guy. Commander Park had stopped trying to intervene. She was watching Flynn with something between horror and pride on her face. I noticed her hand had drifted to her communications device. Flynn continued, his voice still conversational, almost friendly. Let me tell you about something we call asymmetric warfare. It's basically humanity's specialty. See, we figured out a long time ago that when you're outgunned you don't fight fair. You don't line up your forces and have a nice honorable battle. You attack supply lines, communication networks. You make it expensive and annoying and unpredictable enough that the bigger opponent decides it's not worth the effort. He pulled up another holographic display. This is the human colony ship Meridian. Looks like a standard civilian vessel, right? Registered for agricultural transport. It's been making regular runs between Earth and our outer colonies for 3 years now. You've probably seen it on scanner sweeps and completely ignored it because it's just a boring cargo hauler. The hologram zoomed in on the ship's interior schematics. Except it's not. It's a mobile weapons platform. Those agricultural containers, they're launch tubes. 600 of them, each one carrying a missile with a yield comparable to your standard ship killer torpedoes. And before you ask, yes, we have 17 more ships just like it scattered throughout Council space. All registered as civilian vessels, all completely off your military tracking systems. I heard gasps from several Council members. The Mercantile Guild representative, a Quellan named Bixstar, stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. That violates at least 47 different Council regulations. Bixstar squeaked. Civilian vessels cannot be armed. The penalties for— Oh, I'm aware of the penalties, Flynn interrupted. Roughly the same penalties as illegally seizing inhabited colonies without proper notification. Funny how laws only matter when they're convenient, isn't it? Tormund's scales had stopped rippling. He was starting to understand that something had gone very wrong with his afternoon. Flynn wasn't done. Let's talk about cyber warfare. That's another human specialty. See, we spent decades fighting each other with computer viruses and system hacks before we even left our solar system. We got really good at it. And when we joined the Council, we noticed something interesting. Your computer security is terrible, like embarrassingly bad. You've all been in space for thousands of years, but you're still using encryption algorithms we cracked in the 21st century. He gestured to Dr. Cooper, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else but stepped forward anyway. Dr. Cooper here leads our Xenotechnology Research Division. James, why don't you tell the Council about Project Whisper? Cooper cleared his throat. His voice shook slightly. Project Whisper is a comprehensive infiltration program. Over the past 4 years, we've embedded monitoring software in approximately 78% of all non-human computer systems that interface with Council networks. Not malware, just observers. Watching, learning, recording. The chamber erupted. Council members shouting over each other. Security teams reaching for weapons they weren't allowed to carry into the diplomatic chambers. The noise was deafening. Flynn waited. He just stood there, patient as stone, until the chaos died down. Sit down, he said quietly. And somehow, despite the pandemonium, everyone heard him. Everyone sat down. I'm not finished. Ambassador Kelzin of the Valorian Collective, usually one of the more reasonable Council members, raised a trembling appendage. Ambassador Flynn, surely you realize that what you're describing constitutes acts of espionage and military deception on a scale that could justify your expulsion from the Council. Possibly sanctions. Possibly war. Could. Flynn agreed. If anyone wanted to admit they'd been compromised this thoroughly, if anyone wanted to explain to their constituents how a species that's been in space for 6 years managed to infiltrate systems that were supposed to be impenetrable, if anyone wanted the embarrassment of having this information go public, he let that sink in. But here's the thing, we don't want war. We never did. We just want to be left alone to grow our colonies and trade with people who actually respect us. We want the Council to follow its own laws instead of rewriting them whenever it's inconvenient. We want what you promised us when we joined this organization. Fairness, justice, protection under galactic law. Patricia Valdez stepped forward, finally finding her voice. What Ambassador Flynn is proposing is a return to the original principles of the Council Charter. We're not asking for special treatment. We're asking for equal treatment. By threatening us, Tormund growled. But his voice had lost its earlier confidence. No. Flynn's voice cut through the air like a blade. By informing you of reality, the threat already existed. It's been there for 4 years. You just didn't know about it, because we were being polite. We were hoping diplomacy would work. That reason would prevail, that you'd eventually see us as equals instead of convenient targets. He walked back to the central podium and placed both hands on it. When he spoke again, his voice carried to every corner of the massive chamber. Here's what I need every single member of this Council to understand. Humanity did not come to the stars because we ran out of room on Earth. We didn't join your organization because we needed protection or resources. We came here because we'd finally gotten our own house in order and wanted to be part of something bigger, something better. We wanted to believe that civilization meant more than the strong exploiting the weak. Junior diplomat Martinez, who hadn't spoken the entire time, was openly crying now, tears streaming down his face as he watched his mentor dismantle 4 years of careful diplomatic work. But if that's not what this council represents, Flynn continued, if this is just another arena where might makes right and laws are suggestions for the powerful to ignore, then humanity will adapt. We're very good at adapting. We survived ice ages and plagues and world wars and nuclear brinkmanship. We'll survive this too. He pulled up a final holographic display. It showed star maps, hundreds of systems, thousands of trade routes. These are the supply lines that feed the Draknari Empire. 47% of your food production comes from agricultural worlds in the outer reaches. 62% of your rare minerals are transported through the Kepler Junction. Your entire economy depends on the free flow of goods through council-protected space. The map highlighted several dozen points in red. These are choke points. Places where a single disabled ship could halt traffic for weeks, where a coordinated attack on 3 or 4 key stations could cripple your logistics network. We've spent 4 years mapping every single vulnerability in your infrastructure. Not because we wanted to use this information, because we wanted to make sure nobody else could. Tormund had gone very still, so still that I wondered if he'd stopped breathing. Now, I'm going to make you a deal, Chancellor, and this offer expires in exactly 60 seconds. You give us back Praxis 7. You compensate our people. You follow your own laws going forward. And in exchange we forget about all of this. The hidden weapons platforms stay hidden. The cyber infiltration programs stay dormant. We go back to being the polite, harmless humans you've been pushing around for 4 years. We pretend this conversation never happened. He checked his timepiece. Or you refuse. You call my bluff. You try to expel us from the council or impose sanctions or send your 600 warships to teach humanity a lesson. And then we show the entire galaxy what happens when humans stop playing nice. When we stop following rules that nobody else respects. When we embrace the violent, creative, absolutely relentless approach to problem solving that got us to the top of our planet's food chain despite being weaker, slower, and more fragile than most of our predators. Flynn smiled. That same unsettling smile from earlier. 45 seconds, Chancellor. I recommend you choose wisely. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear my own respiratory system cycling. Every eye in the chamber was locked on Tormund. The Draknari Chancellor's scales had lost their polished sheen. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. I watched him calculate the odds, weigh his options. Consider the political fallout of backing down versus the potential consequences of calling Flynn's bluff. 30 seconds, Flynn announced cheerfully. Ambassador Kelson stood up. I move that the Council immediately review the Praxis 7 situation and issue a preliminary ruling in favor of returning the colony to human control pending full investigation. Seconded, came a voice from the Centauri delegation, then another from the Andorian sector. Within seconds half the Council was signaling their support. Tormund's jaw worked silently. His career, his reputation, probably his entire political future balanced on what he said next. 10 seconds, Flynn said softly. Fine. The word came out like Tormund was chewing glass. The Draknari Empire will return Praxis 7 to human administration, pending review of the territorial claim process, and negotiation of appropriate compensation. Flynn's expression didn't change. You have 48 hours. Compensation at market rates plus 20% for emotional distress and displacement costs. And the rule change gets reverted. All of it, Chancellor. Or I stop being polite. Tormund nodded once. A sharp, angry gesture. Then he turned and stalked out of the chamber, his entire delegation scrambling to follow. The moment the doors closed behind them, the chamber exploded into conversation. Council members arguing, debating, demanding explanations. Security officers trying to restore order. Diplomatic staff rushing to their communication stations. Flynn simply walked back to his delegation. Commander Park grabbed his arm. Sir, did we just commit political suicide? Probably, Flynn admitted. He looked exhausted again, like whatever energy had fueled his performance had drained away the moment Tormund left. But I'm tired, Lisa. I'm so tired of watching them laugh while our people suffer. Someone had to say something. Young Martinez wiped his eyes. That was the most terrifying thing I've ever witnessed. That, Flynn corrected gently, was humanity with the safety off. That was us giving them a glimpse of what we're actually capable of when we stop worrying about being liked. And I really truly hope we never have to do it again. Dr. Cooper was already on his tablet, probably sending emergency messages to Earth. They're going to investigate everything you claimed. They'll want proof. Then I guess it's a good thing we actually built all those things I mentioned. Flynn started gathering his materials. Tell the team back home to prep for inspection, and make sure the Meridian's crew knows they're about to get a lot of attention. I watched them leave the chamber. 5 humans, walking calmly through the chaos they'd created. Commander Park stayed close to Flynn, her hand near her sidearm even though weapons were prohibited, just in case. As they passed my observation station, Flynn glanced up, made direct eye contact with me, and winked. I've been filing reports on human behavior for 17 cycles. I've documented thousands of hours of diplomatic interactions, and I finally understood what I'd been missing all along. Humans weren't weak. They weren't spineless. They were patient. They were waiting, watching, learning everything they needed to know about us while we underestimated them. And when they finally decided they'd had enough, when that polite facade finally dropped, they were absolutely terrifying. I filed my report that evening, flagged it as highest priority, sent it directly to the Antarian High Command with a single recommendation attached. Do not provoke humanity. Do not push them. Do not mistake their patience for weakness. Because when humans stop being polite, when they stop playing by rules that only apply to them, when they embrace the violent creativity that carried them from caves to starships in a few thousand years, there is no predicting what they'll do. And I really truly never want to find out. 3 days later, Praxis 7 was returned to human control, full compensation paid. The rule change reverted. Every demand met without further negotiation. The Ambassador Flynn went back to being polite, saying please and thank you, smiling through tense negotiations. But now everyone knew. We all knew. That smile was a choice. That politeness was a decision they made every single day, and we never ever made them reconsider that choice again.